Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
A mother strapped her bag on tightly, hoisted her son onto her back, and started to bolt as fast as she could. The river's current kept pushing her farther back, but it didn't matter. She just needed to get away as far from the land as she possibly could. From the corner of her eye, she saw another mother desperately trying to catch up to her, and then another, and then thousands and thousands of people running through the icy cold Yangtze River against the harsh and freezing December wind. All with one goal in mind, to get away as far as possible from the pack of ravenous men trenching into the woods to get to them. She threw her bag off, held her son's head just right above the water, and began swimming. With this many people scrambling in, it was going to be impossible to fight against the river's current. Still, she had to try. Anything is better than nothing. And that's when she saw it. Body after body, each one rising so peacefully as if it was taking a leisure bath, their faces floating down with streams of red pouring around them. Thousands and thousands of bodies rising, and thousands of bodies hit water just the same. The men, from as close as the shore could be, had begun firing atomic weapons at the refugees. Hi friends, welcome back to Sunday Sips with Safa. Today we're back on the couch because I mentioned a few weeks ago, my last episode, about how I'm having an issue with my central air. The issue is temporarily resolved, but this is the coldest room in the house. And today we're drinking this weird drink that I whipped up. I'm on a very weird health kick lately, so basically in this I have apple juice, lemon juice, kale, spinach, mango puree, bananas, and grass powder. Or basically whatever's going bad in my fridge gets to go into this glass first. Well, the fruits and the veggies, yeah, let's give it a shot. I don't know. I feel like it's good because I've done that blend before. I'm talking too much. Okay. Nope, I was right. That's fine. Today's episode will be about the Nanjing Massacres, also known as the R word of Nanking. So that being said, there are a lot of heavy topics in this one. Decapitation, burning of bodies, SA. The list of atrocities committed is insane. These topics are always difficult to discuss, but it's so important that we continue to discuss them. If this sounds like it's going to be a heavy episode for you, then please exit out and I will see you in the next one. Now let's begin. It's no secret that Japan has an intense history with this imperialism era. But then again, the entire world has an intense history with its own villain arc, if I put it lightly. And of course, Japan today is in no shape or form represented by its past. Other than that, they continue to mend and reform relationships that were severed by their previous government. But it's always so mind-blowing when you discover that there was a period of time where people were so ruthless and vicious, sparing no one in sight. And Japan, 1894, was no different than the rest. The thirst for land, growth in population, rise in economic advance was far too strong. For the next 51 years, Japan would invade multiple countries such as Korea, Russia, and in today's case, China. The people of Nanjing were mostly made up of refugees who migrated through China to avoid the Japanese regime's wrath. By 1928, the Chinese nationalist government declared Nanjing as the capital city, booming its population and creating a safe haven for all. But the problem with colonization is they never stopped colonizing. And Nanjing, while it was safe at the time, was still a target. So, December 1937, Japan has successfully overtaken Shanghai after a 3-month-long battle, and now was closing towards the proximity of Nanjing. They demanded the city to surrender immediately, but the Chinese troops refused their request and instead stationed up guard against the border of the Yangtze River. The Yangtze River, which is about 4,000 miles long and 2 to 12 miles wide, depending on the province, is known to be the world's third largest river to date. It starts at the mountains of the Qinghai province in China on the Tibetan Plate and flows all the way into the East China Sea near Shanghai. To put it more vividly, the diameter of our planet is 8,000 miles. So from the North Pole to the center of the equator is almost 4,000 miles. And then from the equator to the South Pole is another 4,000. So that means the Yangtze River is as long as half the Earth. But 2 miles wide is really not that long if you think about it. To walk from one end to another on dry land, it'll take about 30 to 40 minutes. For example, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco is roughly 1.7 miles long, and so on a good day, it takes about 10 minutes to drive across or 30 minutes to walk across. And for a swimmer with great stamina, to swim 2 miles would roughly take about 60 minutes. But of course, if there's heavy current, the time could increase and the chances of survival could decrease. It makes it easier if you have 2 Navy fleets that dock themselves at each end of the river. I mean, a fleet itself could definitely roughen up the current and make it back and forth in half the time it would take to swim. So, on the Japanese part, that was an advantage. On December 13th, while the Chinese troops crossed the river to guard from the opposite side of the river border, the regime entered the city. The 6th and the 116th Division entered first into the main center of the city. Around the same time, the 9th Division entered the Gonghua Gate, and the 16th Division entered from the Zhongshan Gate and the Taiping Gate. It's such a thought-out strategy because entering from each point forced the civilians to run towards the city center and river. Unfortunately, this ambush was quick and swift, and Nanjing fell into the regime's control. At first, the civilians ran for the river. Since transportation had been blocked off, they jumped into the cold water and began to swim across. Mothers with their children on their back, brothers with their fathers on theirs. Men and women of all ages lightening their loads by dumping their belongings on the shore and diving in, swimming with all the strength that they had. The Japanese walked over casually as if it was a walk in the park and shot down every single person that entered the water. And for those who made it halfway, or even all the way, were eventually shot down by soldiers waiting for them on the other end. They would recover about 50,000 bodies in the next following days. Meanwhile, Chinese soldiers who docked at the borders of the river were captured and brought back to the city to await their execution. Civilians that had been forced into the center of the city were shot by the soldiers, and their homes were destructed by tanks. For nearly 2 days, over 100,000 refugees were murdered, left in the streets with their blood running the very roads they wandered. December 17th, the remaining Chinese troops changed their attires to civilian clothing to disguise themselves and attempted to enter the city. Their goal was to get as many as innocent people out and to infiltrate the enemies. But like I mentioned, the Japanese were playing with the strategy. They would arrest any young man, whoever they suspected a soldier, to almost every young man and send them with the captured soldiers outside the city to await their execution. These men would end up being shot by atomic weapons, burnt by being doused in gasoline, or even bayoneted. But at times, to rise the fear of other civilians, they would be executed in the city itself by forcing the young men to inhale poisonous gas in front of their loved and their respected ones. And those in the city that were still surviving, or their neighbors, were subjected to a far worse fate. The Japanese would refrain from shooting and instead would stab their victims, cutting them open and ripping their hearts out. They would then decapitate the victim, drowning them if they desired, and then burnt the body. Other times they would punch the body in aisles with an awl, which is a pointed tool for marking and making small holes, and even castrate their victims' private parts. The soldiers would loot their victims' homes, taking their valuables or whatever they found valuable, like cigarettes and eggs. Then they would set the homes on fire and at times hide nearby to hunt civilians who would rush over to put the fires out. The estimated death toll was nearly 300,000 refugees and soldiers in just Nanjing itself. And women Any woman who was present would be subjected to SA, whether it be a nun, a woman in their 70s and up, pregnant women, girls who were barely a teenager. No one was spared. They would be subjected to gang arbors in the streets, in the temples, in their own homes. The soldiers would force fathers to assault their own daughters, sons to their own mothers. If you were a woman, you were subject of their entertainment. Those who resisted, attempted escape, would be killed immediately, or at times captured and be subjected to suffering until the soldier was bored and ready to dispose them. The estimated number of women, girls that were essayed is almost 20,000. So sick, so insane that this happened. Like, how can such cruel people exist? How can they feel no remorse for their actions? How is it that even for one moment, not even a single soldier stopped and thought, maybe this isn't the right thing to do? That's the biggest problem of it all. Denial of the Nanjing Massacre after documentation surfaced from Japanese soldiers during 1950s and 60s has yet not been formally addressed by the government. However, Japan today does acknowledge its part in the devastating crime, and since the 70s has fervently amended its relationship with China, but an apology to the victim, to their ancestors, their current surviving members, has yet not been made. Regardless, the International Military Tribunal for the Far East indicted all Class A war criminals during a 2.5-year trial from May of 1946 to November of 1948. The prosecution team was made up of justices from the Allied Nations, which is Australia, Canada, China, France, Great Britain, India, the Netherlands, New Zealand, the Philippines, the Soviet Union, and the United States of America. Of course, other war criminals were also tried in various locations in China for the crimes they committed as well. Those who led the ambush were formally indicted. Out of 80 men tried, 2 defendants died of natural causes during the trial. 1 was admitted to psychiatric ward after having a mental breakdown during the first day of the trial, and 25 men were found guilty of carrying out murder, maim, and ill treatment of prisoners of the war and civilian, committing mass murder, essay, and barbaric torture among the helpless population. 7 of the 25 were sentenced to death by hanging, 16 were sentenced to life imprisonment, and 2 to the lesser term. The remaining were paroled until 1956, and the most shocking of it all, 1 was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but released within 8, and then was imported as a foreign minister. Today, Nanjing is the hub of major culture, art, and education, homing the Nanjing Museum and Nanjing Library, as well as 59 universities. While it is no longer considered a capital city, it still carries the beauty and strength it once held. So if you're planning on a trip to China soon, I would recommend you go visit Nanjing and also see the Yangtze River. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you for being here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.